Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to talk about my last couple of weeks of life, right, of experience. And it's been actually pretty cool in different ways. I've been spending a lot of time working on spirituality. I've been spending a lot of time working on my finances. Health, not yet, but it's like still in the bullpen, so to speak, to use a baseball metaphor. I know very little about baseball, although I know more than I did last year about baseball. But yeah, that's in the bullpen, the health. So finances, I've been doing a really good job on. Spirituality, I feel like I'm pretty strong in. Right. So, and then, interfacing with other people. So just so you guys know, I'm an ENTJ as a personality type. So I'm actually like a very unusual personality to be in spirituality. Most people in spirituality, well, I think everybody's actually in spirituality, but the people who sing the loudest tend to be the conceptual types. So even though I have extroverted thinking as my dominant function, I'm not really stuck in the mind like a lot of other people who are quote unquote thought to be like the spiritual gurus who are like, controlling people with their language. See, that's a trap. The introverted conceptual type wants to control reality with their language because they're trying to feel safe, right? Their ego, which is your comfort zone, right, is trying to feel safe. A lot of people don't understand what ego is. See, ego is not something that people are like confused about this. Ego is your comfortable state. That's ego. It's your comfortable state. So you have to love your ego to become enlightened. People don't realize this. I mean, I'm kind of spewing some things now just because like these are things that I've learned just from interacting with other people that I didn't really like, wasn't like really like pushed into high relief for me before, but now I have the opportunity to kind of see these things in real time, or like very short memory, right? Like short memory of the past. Because right now, what is there? See, this is the thing. It's not the power of now. It's, right, you don't need words, right, to capture anything. This idea that we need words to capture something is the delusion of the intellect. Actually, the intellect doesn't wear the pants over all the other sources of truth. So, but the intellect is still useful, but it's not the king. See, this is what you guys are, some of you guys are, I'm just speaking from my experience. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm just a dude, but I'm just saying, like, from my experience, I'm not young on the path, but I can see a lot of people. I can see exactly what their hang up is. And my words are my marks. That's it for you, right? It's like, am I a teacher? No. Am I a teacher? Yes. Yes and no. Can and can't. Can and can't. Self and no self. It's funny how these oppositions are here and we get so caught up on these. But if you can see behind the terms, that's what makes you awake. And it's not even see. Like, forget about the word see. The word see is limiting. See, anything I say is ultimately just going to be a pointer. But, like, it's not about epistemology grounding truth either. That's a statement. That's language. It's not that. It's not that. I'm telling you, it's not that. I'm excited because, I feel like people don't really understand like what God consciousness is pointing to, or what self-sovereignty is pointing to. They don't get that. And it's easy to dismiss people like this as kind of lunatics or people that are just ego-driven or whatever. But I'm telling you, there's a point to this. I mean, at least from my own experience, there's a point to this. And the point to it is that nobody can teach you about spiritual enlightenment. Nobody can teach you about spiritual enlightenment. Ever. At all. See? All of this is happening within consciousness. It's not happening with you and some other person. See, already you're distracted. Enlightenment is not about creating more narratives. It's about unwinding narratives. And then, I mean, I'm starting to sound a little bit like a purist, which actually kind of pisses me off because I have a little bit of that in my shadow. But I'm starting to realize now, at least right now, the way I'm resonating right now, which is not the same as any other videos I've made, but right now, from my experience in dealing with, non-dual people, other kinds of personality types, so ego is here. Ego backlash is here. It's all part of the experience. And you're trying to share in a way that you believe in. I think that every person wants to share what they believe in. Okay, so now we're getting back into the human now, right? We're not just going to stay in the divine. I really believe like everybody here wants to preserve some kind of value. And so there's this power structure that ultimately is accepted by you. See, this is the thing. This is the God consciousness, the individual sovereignty, is that that's your choice. That's your burden. Like you placed a burden on yourself. A stupid burden on yourself, right? You thought somehow like some words were going to connect you with something that never panned out for you. And you just watched that like fail over and over and over again. You never learned the lesson, which is that there is no second for the self. See, this is the crown, the divine masculine. There's no second for the self. Self is all you have, which is consciousness. And I mean, this sounds crazy, man. I'm trying to make it not sound crazy because I don't think I'm a crazy person. I think I'm a very practical person. But I'm trying to explain these things in ways that, the ordinary person might understand. I mean, God consciousness is not a ridiculous thing. Because here's the thing. If you're not sovereign, then who is? And you say, well, this just sounds like the universe, right? You, ego. Yeah, but that's just you. Like now you're trying to control me with your language. Is that possible? It's not. See? Like anybody who's fucking woke, and not to be angry. I'm not saying fucking for angry. I'm just saying fucking for like obvious. You know what I'm saying? Anybody who's woke to the divine masculine knows that, right? Nobody can teach you anything about spiritual enlightenment. Now, okay, you got that, right? You don't need to wear that like a like Batman or Spider-Man or anything like that. You don't need to be the, the divine masculine who's trying to convince everybody that he's the divine masculine. There's no need for that. But sometimes, right, it needs to be emphasized because people are trapped, man, in certain ways. And everybody has a way to untrap somebody in their own unique way. Right? Think about that. Everybody has the ability to untrap somebody in their own unique way. And you are the sovereign. All right. And so this is the heart. So we're talking about the crown, which is self-sovereignty. Now we're talking about other sovereignty, which is the heart. The heart is that, now, these are just pointers. Okay, so we talked about self-sovereignty, which is that nobody can teach me anything. That doesn't even make sense. You don't need to hear any words to know what you're going to say next. This idea that words aren't necessarily coming before experience is actually just not always true. So, for example, I'll give you a good example of this, very concrete. Let's say that you have an encounter with a dog. Okay, now you may argue with me, you don't even know what a dog is. Okay, whatever. But just say, for the sake of argument, you have an encounter with a dog. Do you really need to know meanings of words to capture the experience of interacting with that dog? No. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to realize this, man. You don't need to know the definition of the sun to experience the sun rising in the morning. Right? That's a beautiful example. It's a beautiful example of that. But words are part of what we do. But when it comes to self-sovereignty, I want you guys to realize, man, that words are the antithesis of self-sovereignty, actually. You don't need to explain yourself. You do it, right, out of charity, but not out of necessity. You do it out of giving. You do it with a sense of can, as opposed to a sense of cannot. You do it from the perspective of encouragement, not to build walls to protect your ego, because you have no reason to protect your ego when you have God consciousness. So, just dealing with the practicalities of spiritual communities actually made me realize, man, I never really wanted to frame it this way, but framing it this way actually makes a kind of sense, because people are trapped in this kind of language thing or this group thing where they're limiting themselves with terms and lingo and the ego, and they're scared. These are scared people, man. They want to relate, but they don't want to accept the fact that they're fucking scared, and they don't want to just do it. They don't want to just do it. They don't want to push. That's fine. But if you're a personality, right, where you're focused on, can versus cannot, then, you're going to have to come to the point where you realize, man, words are a second thing. They're a secondary thing. Words oftentimes are unnecessary and a distraction. Now you may say, well, Joseph, you're sounding very Zen. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, even this whole thing with, shadow and Advaita Vedanta and all this nonsense, right? That's just you jacking yourself off, commenting anonymously on online forums. See, I can take a very body perspective, a very human perspective, and make all these spiritual lunatics look nuts if I want to. I know how to shift perspective to do that. And does that make me special? No, but the fact that I can see that makes me see that it's not so simple. It depends on the person, it depends on what they need. Everybody's trying to grow. Now, you may argue with me about whether persons exist or all this way. So, imagine you're like, I remember, so I'm going to take a break. I'll come back and we'll continue because I have some other examples I want to give, but I don't want to just get drawn out, now because I'm getting a little tired. But when I come back, we'll just start fresh. So just give me 1 second. Okay, friends. So one thing I'm trying to point you guys to is trusting yourself, trusting your intuition, trusting your insight, even if it's ridiculous, even if it's wrong. So forgive me if I'm not the perfect person to give the following information. So just, from my experience in my life. So with Chinese philosophy, there's a period in ancient Western philosophy, and ancient Indian philosophy, and ancient Chinese philosophy. These were very flourishing areas of philosophy. And Chinese philosophy, they call it the 100 schools or the 100 flowers, right? Just like in Western philosophy, there were hundreds of schools. People don't realize this because not everything was codified in writing. And same thing with Indian philosophy. There were hundreds of schools in all three of these major philosophical traditions. And what this shows me, and you guys can disagree with me if you want to, but there's a paradox between feeling like language is right and knowing that it's not. It's kind of an interesting way of saying it. Feeling like language is right and knowing that it's not. That paradox. So much of your life is you want to feel like certain language is right, don't you? Come down to earth, come down to the body, right? To the emotions. You want to feel like certain language is right. I figured it out, right? I'm like Newton, Einstein, or somebody like that. I figured it out, right? Certain language is right. Certain marks, your marks are the correct marks for everybody else, assuming you know what everybody else means. We need this on some level. Don't dismiss this, actually. This is the human masculine, right? The need to know. And also the divine masculine on some level. But the divine masculine is also knows that nobody can teach me about enlightenment. Period. Now, you may say, this sounds like divine ego or something like that. Yeah, because you don't have self-sovereignty. See, that's the thing. People don't know what self-sovereignty is. It takes a long time to achieve self-sovereignty. Does this mean that you have nowhere else to grow? No, because self-sovereignty is a phrase that falls away too. But what self-sovereignty does is it sees through all forms of communication as not being the divine I. If you can't even do this yet, right? It's going to sound like ego to you. It's going to seem like human masculine, like Donald Trump or some egotistical asshole or something like that. Because, if you had divine sovereignty, you wouldn't really care about Donald Trump or any other egotistical asshole on a deeper level, because you would realize doesn't matter. See, that's self-sovereignty. Is you're in control of the I. Period. If people don't understand that pointer, it's not about those words. It's not about what those words point to. Like if you can't find that in yourself, these people will fight you tooth and nail. Don't, it's like, you can be the teacher who teaches this to people, but there's only going to be like a very small percentage of people who are ever going to realize self-sovereignty. I mean, I hate to be blunt, but... And then, in addition, in the final third of this video, you have other sovereignty. And so this is the heart. So if you look at the chakras model, the crown is, in a way, kind of a pointer to self-sovereignty. But then the heart chakra is a pointer to other sovereignty. And so what other sovereignty is we tend to think, okay, I'm gonna tee this up in this kind of a way. So in spiritual communities, we tend to think that heart means loving reality as it is. The problem with this is that's a belief. That's a thought. See? Duh, right? Duh. I mean, but it is. Like, what it does is it negates the I can, and it replaces it with the I can't. See, I can and I can't are both words, but neither one is superior to the other. And actually, I can is more motivating than I can't. You ever notice that? Or you can't. Do you like it when somebody says you can't to you? Well, who are they saying that to? See? Duh, you don't have self-sovereignty. I mean, I don't want to use the word duh too many times. But you know what? When you realize it, you do have, I mean, not to be rude, but you do have this deep realization of how stupid you've been. Not everybody else, but how stupid you've been by listening to other people. I mean, it's unbelievable how stupid you've been for taking other people's words seriously. What a distraction that was to your life. Now, other sovereignty is, it's not just about accepting reality for the way that it is. It's about being good. If you don't know what that is, and if you don't value that, then I would say, your heart chakra is closed. I mean, it's just, that's the case. And so you're going to be somebody who has, you may have self-sovereignty, but you don't have other sovereignty. So you want both of these, actually. And it's not about like proving who has the least reactivity. Like ego backlash is actually very beautiful because that person has courage. The person who exhibits an ego backlash has courage. They want to grow. They're jumping into the deep end of the pool. And they're getting punished for that. Or not, right? Like, so you'll notice, like, if you do it right, like, people actually support your ego backlash, right? They'll say, they want to care for you because they see that you're acting in a way that doesn't make them feel threatened. But a lot of this is heart. And you'll notice some of the greatest spiritual gurus they're really strong in heart. But you got to have crown. I mean, you got to have all, to say you got to have this, you got to have that, that's also a limiting belief. But I'm just saying that, like, it's a very succinct way of organizing ideas about spirituality applied to the whole. So I'm an extroverted thinker as an ENTJ. So I'm thinking about the whole, right? And I'm not just thinking about inside of my own mind. That's more like the INTJ, the mastermind. So we can learn different things from every perspective. That's my point. Like every person can teach you something different that can benefit your life. And it's not just about teaching, it's about sharing. Forget about teaching, it's about sharing. It's like that homeless guy who came to you and talked to you and you realize this guy's smarter than everybody who, you know what I'm saying? Or that time when you had this great experience, you went to Hawaii or something like that, and you had this great, vacation, or you have this like dark night of the soul. I mean, some of it also comes back to like what you remember too. But notice that consciousness isn't really hinged on memory, thought. Like consciousness is just okay. Just like, there's a paradox between wanting to sort of like push for change and also accepting what's happening as okay. And to reduce this to words, I think, is never going to work. And it also makes it sound like it's a very stable kind of thing. This is just, but we can't help but do this, right? Like even people who talk shit about people who do this are talking shit about people who do this. You see that? You're if you don't want to say, then don't say. But if you say, even if you're like a naysayer, right? Oh, there's no separate self, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, you know what it sounds like to me? It just sounds like somebody else's words. Like I have to, and this is offends certain people, right? This sounds like ego. I have to make sense of everything, right, to be able to properly react. So if something is coming into my experience, then I acknowledge it and I don't always give myself enough time, I don't think, but maybe I do, to react to whatever's coming into my experience. And I give like my authentic reaction to it. And then that's taken a certain way by other people, right, who interpret those marks, right, according to their own consciousness. And I'm well aware of that. In fact, I try to be polite about that, and I try to be uplifting to other people. I try not to hurt other people or cause myself too much unnecessary suffering. Although I will do that if I feel like I'm growing, which I have. And if I feel like I'm growing, then I'll lean into that, And I really feel like lately I've been wanting to defend the idea of self-sovereignty and God consciousness with my own take on it. And I think that's the beauty of actually, right, what I'm able to offer in this video is that I've been quote unquote pushed or pulled to say these kinds of things and feel like they're important to say because of experiences with spiritual communities where I realize there is a kind of adherence to words or language, specifically words that say I can't or you can't. And that's the opposite. That's like building walls instead of building inspiration. So with heart, with other sovereignty, you want to be spreading inspiration for people. Not using words to like pull them toward what your ego is actually projecting as a weakness, which is coming from you, not them. Because you're the one who's stuck and you can't stand, right, other people being liberated because you're stuck by the words that you're looping on. Okay, friends? Hopefully this was a good video. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.